The darkness of space held many secrets, but none darker than the 6 ships that moved through the void like sharks circling wounded prey. Their hulls were painted the color of dried blood, marked with symbols that made peaceful species tremble. These were Koresh hunting vessels, and they had found their target. Captain Vrexkal stood on the bridge of his flagship, his scaled fingers drumming against the command console. His yellow eyes tracked the 3 smaller ships trapped in the center of his formation. They were Threen vessels, cargo ships with minimal weapons and shields that were already failing. The ambush had been perfect. His hunters had waited near the nebula for 2 full cycles, patient as stone until the Threen convoy passed through. The Threen were prey species, soft-bodied creatures with large eyes and gentle natures. They built beautiful ships and created art that sold across the galaxy, but they could not fight. They never could. That was why the Koresh hunted them. Easy targets meant easy profit, and the Koresh hierarchy did not concern itself with the complaints of herbivores. Hull breaches on the 2nd vessel, his tactical officer reported. The officer's voice carried satisfaction. Their shields are at 15%. The others are attempting to cover it, but their weapons cannot penetrate our armor. Vrexkal nodded slowly. This was how it always went. The Koresh had perfected this dance over thousands of years. Circle the prey, cut off escape routes, jam communications, strike at the engines and shields until the prey could neither flee nor defend itself. Then board and take everything of value. Sometimes they kept the crew alive for ransom. Sometimes they did not. It depended on whether the prey fought back. Through the viewport he could see the Threen ships trying desperately to maintain formation. Their engines flared as they attempted to break through the Koresh circle, but his hunters moved with them, matching every maneuver. It was almost beautiful in its precision. 6 predators moving as one, each knowing exactly where the others would be. Captain Menos is broadcasting again, the communications officer said. Same message. Distress call on all standard frequencies. Let him broadcast, Vrexkal said, showing his teeth in what passed for a Koresh smile. We are in deep space, far from the trade routes. By the time anyone receives his call and decides to respond, we will be gone with his cargo. Perhaps we will leave his ships intact this time. I am feeling generous. The bridge crew made sounds of amusement. They all knew that generosity from Vrexkal usually meant he would not destroy the life support systems before leaving. The Threen would survive barely, drifting in dead ships until rescue came days or weeks later. If rescue came at all. Target their engines, Vrexkal commanded. I want them dead in space within the next 10 minutes. Then we board. The Koresh ships tightened their circle. Weapons that could crack planetary shields focused on the small drives that kept the Threen vessels moving. This was the end game. Soon the hunt would be over, and they would claim their prize. On the lead Threen vessel, Captain Menos watched his console with growing despair. The numbers told a story he did not want to read. Shields failing, weapons ineffective, engines taking damage. His crew of 43 souls looked to him for hope, and he had none to give. Keep broadcasting the distress signal, he told his communications officer. His voice was steady despite the fear that gripped his hearts. The Threen had 2 hearts, both of which were beating far too fast. Someone may hear. Someone may come. Captain, we are 3 days from the nearest outpost, his first officer said quietly. Even if someone hears, even if they decide to help, we do not have 3 days. We have minutes. Menos knew this. He had known it from the moment the Koresh ships appeared on their sensors, dropping out of faster-than-light travel in perfect ambush formation. The Koresh were professionals. They did not make mistakes. His small convoy had been doomed from the start. Nevertheless, we keep broadcasting, Menos said. It is all we can do. We are not warriors. We cannot fight them. But we can hope that someone, somewhere, believes that distress calls should be answered. The ship shuddered as another Koresh weapon struck their weakening shields. Damage reports flooded in. Hull breach on Deck 3, life support failing in Section 7. Engine 2 operating at 30%. The list went on, each item another nail in their coffin. Menos had a family. His mate and 3 children waited for him on the Threen homeworld. He thought of them now, wondered if he would ever see them again. The Koresh sometimes kept captives alive for ransom, but just as often they did not. There was no way to know which fate awaited him and his crew. Contact from the 2nd ship, his communications officer reported. They are requesting permission to attempt a breakthrough. They want to try running the blockade. Denied. Menno said immediately. They would be destroyed in seconds. We stay together. If we die as a fleet. On Vrexkal's bridge, the tactical display showed the Threen ships clustering together, trying to protect each other with their failing shields. It was touching in a pathetic sort of way. Prey species always did this. They grouped together at the end as if friendship could stop hunter weapons. Strange reading, Captain, his sensor officer said suddenly. I am picking up a contact at the edge of the system. Vrexkal glanced at the sensor display. A single blip barely registering. Debris, he said dismissively. This system has an asteroid field. You're seeing rocks, might perhaps, the sensor officer said, but he did not sound convinced. The signature is odd. It appeared suddenly. Focus on the prey in front of us, Vrexkal snapped. We are minutes from victory. I will not be distracted by sensor ghosts. The officer returned to his station, but something about the contact bothered him. The way it had appeared, the way it moved, it did not behave like debris or asteroids. It behaved like a ship running silent, trying not to be noticed. Vrexkal was already thinking about the profits from this hunt. Threen cargo was valuable. Art, exotic foods, rare materials. He would be able to upgrade his fleet with the earnings. Perhaps add a seventh hunter to his formation. More ships meant bigger prey, and bigger prey meant greater glory for his name. The boarding pods were being prepared. His warriors were checking their weapons and armor. Everything was proceeding according to plan. The Threen would surrender or be overwhelmed. Their cargo would be transferred. Then his fleet would vanish back into deep space before anyone could respond to their distress calls. It was a perfect hunt. Vrexkal had executed this same pattern dozens of times. He knew every step, every move. There were no surprises in hunting prey species. That was his first mistake. The contact at the edge of the system was not debris. It was not an asteroid. It was something the Koresh had not encountered before. Something they did not understand. It was a ship from a world where prey became predators, where the hunted learned to hunt, where survival meant evolving into something that refused to die quietly. It was a human ship, and it was coming. 4 hours earlier, the patrol frigate Defiant Resolve had been running a standard sweep of the outer sectors when Lieutenant Sarah Kovac picked up something on the communications array. She was the tactical officer, young for her position but sharp as they came. Her family had served in Earth's navies for 6 generations, back when navies meant ships on water instead of ships in space. Captain, I have a distress signal, she called out. Threen vessels under attack. Coordinates are 3 light years from here. Captain Maria Chen looked up from the report she had been reading. She was a woman in her 50s, with gray starting to show in her black hair and lines around her eyes that spoke of too many hard decisions. She had commanded the Defiant Resolve for 8 years, ever since humanity had been allowed to patrol beyond their own solar system. Details, she said simply. Kovac pulled up the information on the main display. 3 civilian cargo vessels. They are reporting Koresh hunters, 6 hostile ships, standard hunting formation. The Threen are outgunned and their shields are failing. How long until we can reach them? Chen asked. At maximum burn 3 hours and 40 minutes, the helmsman reported. But Captain, we are outside our patrol zone. This is not our jurisdiction. Chen stood and walked to the viewport. Outside, stars stretched in all directions, cold and distant. Somewhere out there, people were dying. People who had done nothing wrong except be in the wrong place when predators came calling. Show me everything we have on the Koresh, she said. The ship's xenobiologist, Dr. Yuki Tanaka, brought up files on the main screen. Images of reptilian creatures with yellow eyes and scaled skin appeared. The Koresh hierarchy is one of the oldest spacefaring civilizations, Tanaka explained. They are apex predators from a high-gravity world. Physically strong, aggressive, and they have been conducting what they call hunting raids for over 3,000 years. You mean piracy, Chen said flatly. They call it hunting. The Galactic Council tolerates it because the Koresh have not signed the protection treaties. Technically, they are not breaking any laws. Technically, Chen repeated. The word tasted bitter. And the Threen? Peaceful species, herbivores. They have been council members for 800 years. They make art and trade goods. They do not have a military. Chen was quiet for a long moment. Her crew watched her, waiting. They all knew what she was thinking. The Defiant Resolve was 1 ship. The Koresh had 6. Humans were still new to the galactic community. Only 80 years since first contact. They had been warned repeatedly to avoid conflicts with established species. But Maria Chen had not joined the Earth Defense Fleet to watch people die when she could help them. Chief Rodriguez, she called to the engineering station. I need everything our engines can give. I do not care if you have to duct tape the reactor together. Get me to those coordinates in under 4 hours. Chief Engineer Carlos Rodriguez grinned. He was a stocky man with grease permanently under his fingernails and a tendency to talk to the ship's systems like they were his children. You want the full burn, Captain? The one that makes the safety systems cry? That is exactly what I want. Then strap in, everyone. This is going to be rough. Rodriguez's fingers flew across his console, overriding safeties and pushing the fusion reactor past its rated limits. The ship shuddered as power flooded into the engines. Kovac, pull everything we have on Koresh tactics, Chen ordered. I want to know how they fight, how they think, what they expect. For the next 3 hours, the crew of the Defiant Resolve studied their enemy. They learned that the Koresh always hunted in packs, never alone. That they preferred to circle their prey and wear them down. That they were confident, perhaps overconfident in their superiority. That they had never fought humans before. That last part was important. They will not know what we can do, Kovac said, reading through tactical reports. We have only been in space for 80 years. Most of our combat history is classified or happened in our own system. To them, we are unknowns. Good, Chen said. We use that. Dr. Tanaka, what do the Koresh fear? The xenobiologist considered the question. They are predators, Captain. Predators fear other predators. They fear being outmatched. They fear becoming prey themselves. Then that is what we show them, Chen said. A plan was forming in her mind. Risky and possibly insane, but it might work. We do not arrive and ask them politely to stop. We arrive and we show them what happens when they pick on species under human protection. Captain, Kovac said carefully, the Threen are not under human protection. We have no treaty with them. No formal alliance. They sent a distress call, Chen replied. That is all the treaty I need. Any ship that answers a distress call is protecting that ship. It is an old law, older than spaceflight. It comes from Earth's oceans. When ships would sail for months and the only help you could expect was from whoever heard your call. The bridge crew absorbed this. Most of them had grown up in space, born on stations or colony ships. But they understood what their captain was saying. There were rules that went deeper than treaties and laws. There were rules about what it meant to be human. 15 minutes to contact, the helmsman announced. Dropping to sublight speeds. Go silent, Chen ordered. All systems to passive. I want us to drift in like ghosts. Kovac, ready weapons, but do not power them until I give the word. Rodriguez, I need the engines ready for full combat burn on my command. You want to hit them before they know we are there, Kovac said, understanding dawning. I want to hit them so hard they forget their own names, Chen corrected. The Threen are still broadcasting. That means they are still alive. We are not too late. The Defiant Resolve dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the system, engines cold, running on momentum and minimal thrusters. To the Koresh sensors, if they noticed at all, it would look like debris or a small asteroid. Nothing to worry about. On the bridge, the crew watched the tactical display. 6 Koresh ships in a perfect hunting circle. 3 Threen vessels clustered in the center. Shields nearly gone, engines damaged. It was execution in progress. Chen's jaw tightened. She had seen this before, back when she was younger, serving on a colony defense ship. Pirates attacking a civilian transport. By the time her ship arrived, there had been nothing left but wreckage and bodies. She still remembered the faces of the colonists they had failed to save. Not this time, not on her watch. Dr. Tanaka, compose a message in Koresh language, she said. Tell them that these ships are under human protection. Tell them to withdraw immediately. Captain, should we not send that before we attack? Tanaka asked. Chen smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. Who said anything about sending it before? We send it after. I want them to know exactly who hurt them. The bridge fell silent except for the quiet hum of systems. They were close now. Close enough to see the Koresh ships through the viewport. Close enough to strike? All crew battle stations, Chen announced shipwide. We are going in hot. Make your ancestors proud. The Defiant Resolve came alive. Engines flared from cold to full burn in seconds. Weapons powered up, shields snapped into place. And then, like a predator that had been waiting in the dark, the human ship accelerated directly at the 2 nearest Koresh vessels. On Vrexikal's bridge, alarms began screaming. The contact they had dismissed as debris was now showing itself to be a warship, and it was coming at them with velocity that should have torn any ship apart. The hunt was about to become very different. The universe had a way of teaching lessons to those who thought they understood everything. Captain Vrexkull was about to receive an education. Contact accelerating, his sensor officer shouted. Velocity is impossible. They should be experiencing fatal forces. Vrexkull stared at the display in disbelief. The unknown ship was not just moving fast. It was moving at speeds that would crush most species into paste against the back of their chairs. Whatever this ship was, whoever was flying it, they were either insane or built very differently from normal spacefaring races. 2 ships, break and intercept, Vrexkull ordered. Standard engagement pattern. The rest maintained position on the prey. 2 of his hunters peeled away from the circle around the 3 vessels. They were confident, moving with the practiced ease of warriors who had won every fight they had ever been in. The Koresh ships were heavily armored, with weapons that could pierce capital ship hulls. Whatever this newcomer was, it would learn not to interfere with a Koresh hunt. That confidence lasted exactly 30 more seconds. The human ship did not slow down. It did not attempt to dodge. It came straight at the 2 Koresh vessels like a missile, and at the last possible moment, it did something that made Vrexkull's blood run cold. It drifted. The defiant resolve cut its engines and fired its lateral thrusters at full power. The ship rotated 90 degrees while still moving forward at incredible speed, presenting its weapons to the Koresh vessels while maintaining its momentum. Physics should not have allowed it. The forces involved should have killed everyone aboard. But humans had been born on a death world where gravity tried to crush them every day. They had evolved to handle forces that would kill softer species, and they had built their ships to take advantage of that. Fire, Chen commanded. Railguns thundered in the silence of space. Solid slugs of dense metal accelerated to a fraction of light speed hammered into the first Koresh ship. The impacts overwhelmed its shields in seconds and tore through the armored hull like paper. Systems exploded. Atmosphere vented into space. The Koresh ship went dark, tumbling away from the engagement. The second Koresh vessel tried to turn, tried to bring its weapons to bear, but the human ship was already past it. A nuclear-pumped torpedo launched, a weapon that most species had banned as too barbaric for modern warfare. Humans had no such restrictions. The torpedo detonated between the 2 Koresh ships. The electromagnetic pulse washed over both vessels, frying their electronics, killing their systems, leaving them dead in space. Not destroyed, but helpless, floating targets. The entire engagement had lasted less than 15 seconds. On his bridge, Vrexkull felt something he had not felt in decades. Fear. Real, genuine fear. Not the thrill of the hunt, not the excitement of danger, but actual terror at the realization that he might die today. Recall all ships, he shouted. Form defensive sphere, now. His remaining 4 hunters abandoned the 3 vessels and raced toward him, taking up positions in a protective formation. It was the standard Koresh response to an unknown threat. Put all your ships in a tight group where they could support each other. Present a united front. Make it difficult for the enemy to isolate individual vessels. It was a good tactic. It had worked for thousands of years against dozens of species. It was about to fail spectacularly. The human ship slowed, coming to a relative stop several thousand kilometers away. Close enough to threaten, far enough to make targeting difficult. Vrexkull could see it clearly now on his view screen. It was smaller than his flagship, sleeker, with lines that suggested it was built for speed rather than durability. But there was something about it that set his scales itching. Something dangerous. Get me a tactical analysis, he demanded. What species is that? What are we facing? His database officer worked frantically. Searching. I have a match. That is a human vessel. Species classification. Recently spacefaring. Unproven in large-scale combat. Moderate technology level. Threat assessment. Low to moderate. Your threat assessment is wrong, Vrexkull said quietly. Before anyone could respond, the communication system activated. A voice spoke in perfect Koresh language, the accent flawless, the tone calm and educational. Attention Koresh vessels. This is Dr. Yuki Tanaka of the Earthship Defiant Resolve. You are currently engaged in hostile action against civilian vessels. You have 30 seconds to power down your weapons and surrender, or we will resume fire. I should mention something interesting about human behavior. You hunt in packs, so do we. You should have asked who answered their call. Vrexkal's blood turned to ice. The human ship was not alone. The plural was important. They hunt in packs. So do we. Scan for additional contacts, he screamed. His sensor officer's hands shook as he worked. Captain, I am picking up 3 new signatures. They just appeared. They must have been running completely cold. A destroyer and 2 corvettes. They are forming an attack pattern. 3 more human ships dropped into normal space, their positions carefully chosen to create a triangle with the Threen vessels at the center and the Koresh formation caught between them. It was a wolf pack tactic, ancient and effective. Isolate the prey. Cut off escape. Attack from multiple angles. Except the Koresh were no longer the hunters. They were the hunted. On the Threen flagship, Captain Menos watched in stunned disbelief. One moment they had been preparing to die. The next moment, ships with strange markings had appeared and attacked the Koresh with a ferocity he had never witnessed. Now 4 human vessels surrounded the Koresh formation, and the predators who had been so confident minutes ago looked lost. Who are they? His first officer asked. I do not know, Menos admitted. I have heard of humans. New species they keep to themselves mostly, but I have never heard of them doing this. Why would they help us? We have no alliance with them. No treaty. Menos had no answer. In his experience, species did not risk their lives for strangers. It made no sense by any logic he understood. And yet here were 4 human ships outnumbered but clearly unafraid, placing themselves between the Threen and certain death. On the defiant resolve, Captain Chen watched the tactical display with cold satisfaction. The Koresh had done exactly what she had expected. They had clustered together like scared children, giving up their mobility advantage for the illusion of safety. Kovac, split them, she ordered. I want that formation broken. Show them what happens when prey fights back. The 4 human ships moved in perfect coordination. The destroyer went high. The 2 corvettes swept wide on the flanks, and the defiant resolve went straight down the middle. They did not circle. They did not wait. They attacked with the same aggression that the Koresh had shown the Threen, but with far greater skill. Koresh weapons fired, plasma bolts and particle beams lancing out. But the human ships moved like they were dancing, each one seeming to know where the others would be without needing to communicate. They had trained for this. Humans, who had fought wars on their homeworld for thousands of years, who had learned every dirty trick of combat, who had turned warfare into an art form. The first Koresh ship to break formation did so because a railgun slug punched through its engines. It drifted away from the group helpless. One of the human corvettes moved in, not to destroy but to disable, targeting weapons and propulsion with surgical precision. A second Koresh vessel took a missile strike that blew its weapon arrays into scrap metal. It was still intact, still survivable, but it could no longer fight. Vrexkal realized with growing horror that the humans were not trying to kill them. They were trying to capture them. This was not combat. This was a demonstration. The humans were showing the entire galaxy through the sensor records that would survive. What happened when you attacked the wrong prey? All ships, scatter, Vrexkal ordered. Break formation. Retreat at random vectors. It was the right call tactically. A scattered fleet was harder to engage than a grouped one, but it was also an admission of defeat, an acknowledgement that they could not win this fight. His hunters broke and ran, each one desperately accelerating in a different direction, hoping to escape the human net. One made it. One actually managed to get far enough away to begin charging its faster-than-light drive. The human destroyer shot it. A single railgun round, perfectly calculated, that struck the FTL drive just as it was beginning to spin up. The resulting explosion did not destroy the ship, but it crippled it, leaving it stranded in normal space. Of 6 Koresh hunters, 5 were now disabled or captured. Only Vrexkal's flagship remained combat-capable, and it was surrounded by 4 human ships that moved like sharks. Vrexkal stood alone on his bridge watching his fleet die around him. Not die in the literal sense, but die in every way that mattered. His hunters were disabled, helpless, drifting in space like the prey they had spent their lives hunting. The irony was not lost on him. His crew looked at him waiting for orders, waiting for him to find some clever tactic, some brilliant strategy that would turn this disaster around. But there was nothing. The humans had outmaneuvered them completely. Every time he tried to predict their movements, they did something unexpected. Every time he thought he understood their tactics, they showed him something new. "Captain," his weapons officer said quietly, "we cannot win this fight." It hurt to hear the words spoken aloud. Vrexkal had commanded his hunting fleet for 20 years. 20 years of successful raids, of perfect hunts, of prey that never escaped. He was a legend among his people, and now, in less than 10 minutes, an unknown species had reduced him to nothing. "They are hailing us," the communications officer reported. "On screen," Vrexkal said. He needed to see them. Needed to understand what kind of species could do this. The view screen activated, and Vrexkal found himself looking at a human female. She was older, with dark eyes that held no mercy. Behind her, he could see other humans working at stations, their movements efficient and calm. They were not celebrating their victory. They were simply doing their job. "I am Captain Maria Chen of the Earth Defense Fleet Vessel Defiant Resolve," the human said. Her voice was steady, almost gentle. It made what she said next even more terrifying. "You have two options, Captain. You can surrender your ship or you can die. I recommend surrender. We have already disabled 5 of your vessels. Your crew is alive on those ships because we chose to let them live. Do not make me regret that choice." Vrexkal wanted to snarl, wanted to rage, wanted to attack, even though he knew it was suicide. But he looked around his bridge at his crew, at warriors who trusted him to make the right decision. If he attacked, they would die. All of them. And for what? For pride? For the reputation of a hunter who had been outmatched? "If I surrender," he said slowly, "what happens to my crew?" "They will be detained," Chen replied. "Treated fairly under the laws of warfare. Fed, given medical care, and eventually returned to your people. We are not monsters, Captain. We do not torture prisoners. We do not execute the helpless. But we do hold people accountable for their actions, and me? You will face trial for piracy and attempted murder of civilian vessels. Whether your government chooses to acknowledge that trial is up to them, but you will answer for what you tried to do here today." Vrexkal closed his eyes. His ancestors would be ashamed. His family would bear the dishonor. But his crew would live. "I surrender," he said quietly. "Wise choice," Chen replied. "Power down your weapons and shields. We will be boarding shortly. Any resistance will be met with lethal force." The connection ended. Vrexkal turned to his weapons officer and gave the hardest order of his life. "Power down all systems. We are done." On the Defiant Resolve, Chen allowed herself a small breath of relief. The Koresh captain had made the smart choice. Good. She had enough violence in her life without adding more bodies to the count. "Send boarding parties," she ordered. "But stay alert. Some of them might decide to go down fighting." Lieutenant Kovich organized the boarding teams, sending Marines in full combat armor to each disabled Koresh ship. They moved with precision, securing corridors and disarming the crew. There were a few Koresh warriors who tried to fight, but they were quickly subdued. Humans might be smaller than the reptilian Koresh, but in zero-gravity combat, size mattered less than training. Chen left the bridge and took a shuttle to the Threen flagship. She needed to speak with Captain Menos directly, to explain what had happened and what would happen next. The shuttle docked with the damaged vessel, and Chen made her way through corridors that showed the signs of battle. Scorch marks from near misses, emergency bulkheads sealed against hull breaches, crew members looking exhausted and traumatized. She found Captain Menos on his bridge, staring at the view screen that showed the disabled Koresh ships. He turned when she entered, his large eyes taking in her uniform and the rank insignia on her shoulder. "Captain Chen," he said, his voice filled with wonder. "You are real. For a moment I thought we had died, and this was some dream our minds created to ease the passing. You are very much alive," Chen said with a small smile. "And you are going to stay that way." "Why?" Menos asked. The question seemed to burst out of him. "Why did you come?" "We have no alliance with your people, no treaty. You risked your ships and your crew for strangers. This makes no sense to me." Chen had been asked this question before, usually by species who could not understand why humans did what they did. She had learned to answer it simply. "You sent a distress call," she said. "We heard it. That is enough. But you were outside your patrol zone. You had no obligation to respond. Captain Menos, let me tell you something about humans. We are a young species, new to the stars, but we have been sailing ships for thousands of years on our homeworld. And there is a law, older than any government, older than any treaty. When you hear a distress call, you answer. It does not matter if you know them. It does not matter if they can pay you back. You answer, because someday it might be you sending that call. Someday you might be the one who needs someone to answer. Manos was silent for a long moment. Then to Chen's surprise, tears began to roll down his face. Not tears of sadness, but tears of relief, of gratitude, of emotions he could not put into words. "Thank you," he whispered. "Thank you for hearing us." Chen reached out and placed a hand on his shoulder. "You are welcome. Now let us get your ships patched up enough to limp to the nearest station, and then we have some explaining to do to the Galactic Council." As Chen had predicted, the explaining was not fun. Within hours of the engagement, reports were flooding through the Galactic Communication Network. The Koresh hierarchy filed an immediate protest, claiming that humans had violated their sovereign right to conduct hunting operations. They demanded the return of their ships and crew, and compensation for damages. The Threen Collective, on the other hand, offered immediate alliance with humanity. They provided detailed sensor records of the attack, showing clearly that the Koresh had been engaged in piracy against civilian vessels. They also broadcast the communications from the human ships, including Dr. Tanaka's warning. But the real firestorm came from the thousands of other species who received the data. For centuries, predator species like the Koresh had operated with impunity. They hunted weaker races, taking what they wanted, and the Galactic Council did nothing because the predators were powerful and the prey were not. Now, suddenly, someone had fought back. Someone had shown that predators could be beaten, that hunters could become the hunted. The implications rippled through the galaxy like a shockwave. On a merchant vessel carrying goods from one system to another, a captain who had paid protection money to pirates for years saw the engagement video and started to hope. On a colony world that had been raided by slavers, survivors watched humans defeat 6 Koresh ships and felt something they had not felt in a long time: justice. But not everyone was pleased. In the chambers of several predator governments, leaders watched the same videos with growing anger and fear. The humans had upset the balance. They had shown weakness could be overcome. They had introduced a new variable into the galactic equation. In the Koresh hierarchy's war council, the debate was fierce. Some called for immediate retaliation against humanity. Others urged caution, pointing out that 6 ships had been defeated by 4, and perhaps humans were more dangerous than their databases suggested. In the end, they decided to do what predators always did when faced with unknown danger. They would test the humans again, more carefully this time. They would learn their capabilities, and then they would decide whether to attack or to avoid. But there was one thing they did not consider, one factor they could not account for. Humans did not just fight for themselves. They fought for anyone they decided was under their protection. And once humans decided you were part of their pack, they would fly into hell itself to defend you. The Koresh would learn this lesson eventually, but not before several more of their hunting fleets disappeared. Their ships found drifting with dead engines and messages spray-painted on their hulls in multiple languages. You picked the wrong prey. 3 months after the incident, Captain Maria Chen stood in a chamber she had never expected to visit. The Galactic Council Hall was immense, a structure built to house representatives from 300 different species. The architecture was designed to accommodate beings of all sizes, from tiny insectoids to massive silicon-based life forms. Somewhere in this building were diplomats who breathed methane, others who lived in water, and some who existed primarily as energy patterns. Chen wore her dress uniform, dark blue with gold piping and the insignia of the Earth Defense Fleet on her shoulder. Beside her stood Captain Manos, representing the Threen Collective. Behind them, in a separate area reserved for prisoners, stood Vrexkal in restraints. The council chamber itself was circular, with seating arranged in tiers. At the center was a raised platform where those giving testimony would stand. Chen could feel hundreds of eyes on her, some human, most alien. The weight of their attention was heavy. The council chairman, a being that looked like a floating jellyfish made of light, activated the chamber's translation systems. When it spoke, the words came from speakers placed throughout the room, rendered in every language simultaneously. This council recognizes Captain Maria, Chen of the human species Earth. You have been summoned to explain the incident that occurred in the Valthene sector 3 months ago. The Koresh hierarchy has filed formal charges against you and your government for acts of piracy and unlawful violence against their vessels. Chen stepped onto the central platform. She had prepared for this moment, had written speeches and practiced arguments. But standing here now, looking at the representatives of hundreds of worlds, she decided to speak from her heart instead. "Honorable council members," she began, "I will keep this simple. 3 months ago, my ship received a distress call. 3 civilian vessels were under attack by 6 military ships. We responded to that call. We defended those civilians, and we captured the attackers. That is the entire story." A representative from a species Chen did not recognize spoke up. Its voice was high-pitched and mechanical. "The Koresh claim you attacked without provocation or warning. They say you violated their hunting rights." "Hunting rights?" Chen repeated, letting the words hang in the air. "Tell me, council member, when did piracy become a right? When did attacking unarmed cargo ships become something the galaxy should tolerate? The Koresh have conducted such operations for 3,000 years, another representative said. This one was reptilian, possibly allied with the Koresh. It is their culture, their way of life. Chen felt her temper rising but kept her voice level. My species also had cultures that practiced things we are not proud of. Slavery, conquest, genocide. We called those things wrong, and we stopped doing them. Culture is not an excuse for cruelty. The chairman's light pulsed. Captain Chen, you are not here to judge the cultural practices of other species. You are here to explain why you attacked Koresh vessels in neutral space. With respect, I am here to explain why I defended civilian ships that were sending distress calls, Chen corrected. The Koresh vessels were not in neutral space conducting peaceful activities. They were actively engaged in an attack. They had disabled shields, damaged engines, and were preparing to board. If we had waited another 10 minutes, the Threen crew would have been dead or captured. Captain Menno stepped forward then, his voice trembling slightly. The council should know that the humans gave the Koresh an opportunity to surrender before resuming fire. After disabling 2 ships with their opening attack, they broadcast a warning. The Koresh chose to continue fighting. Everything that happened after that was self-defense. Self-defense for ships that were not even being attacked, the reptilian representative argued. The humans were not the targets. They inserted themselves into a situation that did not involve them. Chen turned to face the representative directly. A distress call involves everyone who hears it. That is a basic principle of spacefaring. Or has the council decided that some species deserve to be saved while others do not? The chamber erupted in noise. Representatives were arguing with each other in dozens of languages. Some supported Chen's position. Others called for sanctions against humanity. The chairman had to pulse his light several times to restore order. When the chamber quieted, a new voice spoke. It came from a section Chen had been told to expect. The Koresh diplomatic delegation, led by an elderly female named Kreshtar. The humans speak of principles, Kreshtar said, her voice old but strong. But what they do not speak of is jurisdiction. They were in deep space, outside their territory, outside their authority. They appointed themselves as protectors of species they had no treaty with. They set themselves up as judges and executioners. This is dangerous precedent. Chen had expected this argument. Council Chairman, may I ask Representative Kreshtar a question? The chairman's light flickered in what might have been approval. You may. Chen turned to the Koresh representative. If the situation had been reversed, if human civilian ships were under attack and a Koresh military vessel heard our distress call, would they have responded? Kreshtar was silent for a moment. Then honestly she answered, No, we would not involve ourselves in the affairs of others without benefit to ourselves. Then that is the difference between us, Chen said quietly. We respond to distress calls. We protect those who cannot protect themselves. We believe that spacefaring species have a responsibility to help each other survive the darkness between stars. If the council finds that wrong, then I suppose we are guilty. In the prisoner area, Vrexikal listened to the arguments flowing around him. He had spent 3 months in human custody, and it had been nothing like he expected. The humans had treated him fairly as promised. Fed him, gave him medical care, even provided him with legal representation. They had not tortured him, had not humiliated him beyond the basic fact of his captivity. He had spent that time thinking about the engagement, replaying it in his mind, trying to understand how everything had gone so wrong, and he had come to a realization that sat uncomfortably in his thoughts. The humans had been right. He had been hunting prey, attacking civilians, doing what Koresh had always done. And he had seen nothing wrong with it because that was his culture, his way of life. But watching the council debate now, hearing the arguments, he wondered if culture was enough justification, if tradition excused cruelty. When the council chairman asked if he had anything to add to his defense, Vrexcal surprised everyone by asking to speak. "I was taught that hunting prey was honorable," he said, his words translated and broadcast through the chamber, that taking from the weak was the right of the strong. "I believed this because it was what my people had always believed. But I was wrong." The chamber fell silent. A Koresh admitting fault was almost unheard of. "Captain Chen did not attack us without reason," Vrexcal continued. "We were attacking civilians. We were going to board their ships, take their cargo, possibly kill their crew. We were doing this not because we needed to survive, but because we could. Because no one had ever stopped us before. The humans stopped us, and they were right to do so." Kreshitar stood abruptly. "You shame your people with these words." "No," Vrexcal said firmly. "We shame ourselves with our actions. How many species have we raided? How many ships have we destroyed? How many lives have we ended for profit? And we call this honor? The humans showed me something in those 3 months of captivity. They showed me what honor actually looks like. It looks like risking your life for strangers. It looks like answering distress calls even when there is no profit in it. It looks like treating your prisoners with dignity even when they deserve none." The council chamber erupted again, but this time the tone was different. Representatives were not arguing but discussing, considering, thinking about the implications of what they had just heard. The chairman let the discussion continue for several minutes before calling for order. "This council will recess to consider all testimony. We will reconvene tomorrow to deliver a judgment." That night, Chen sat in her temporary quarters on the station, looking out at the stars. Dr. Tanaka brought her a cup of tea, an Earth custom that the doctor insisted helped with stress. "Do you think we did the right thing?" Tanaka asked quietly. "Yes," Chen said without hesitation. "We saved lives. We stopped bad people from doing bad things. How could that be wrong? The council might not see it that way." "Then the council is wrong." Chen took a sip of tea. "Yuki, we are not going to apologize for helping people. If that gets us kicked out of the galactic community, so be it. We will survive. We always have." The next day, the council reconvened. The chamber was packed with representatives from species that had never attended before. Word of the trial had spread, and everyone wanted to see what the galaxy would decide. The chairman spoke. "This council has considered all testimony. We have reviewed the sensor logs, communications records, and tactical data from the incident. We have heard from all parties involved, and we have reached a decision." Chen stood straight, ready to accept whatever came. "Thank you for watching and comment for next part." The council chamber floated in the darkness between stars. Inside, beings from 1,000 different worlds gathered under the pale blue lights. Some had wings, others had scales. Some breathed oxygen, others needed methane. But they all came together in this place called Kepler Prime to talk about the future of the galaxy. Speaker Thelax moved through the crowd on 6 delicate legs. Her moth-like wings caught the light as she carried an old data tablet. She had found something strange in the ruins on Dust 7th. Something that made her mandibles click with excitement. Ancient writing. References to a species no one remembered. The old texts mention them, she said to the assembled leaders. They called themselves humans. They came from a planet called Earth or Terra. 10,000 years ago they shared technology with our ancestors. Then they vanished. An elderly crystalline being named Kirith hummed softly. "I have heard this story. Most believe it is a myth. A legend to explain where our faster-than-light drives came from. But what if it is real?" Thelax insisted. "What if they are still out there?" The others dismissed her concerns. The galaxy was mapped. Every star system was charted. There was no Earth, there never had been. It was just a story, but Thelax was right and she was wrong. Earth existed. It had always existed. Humanity had never gone anywhere. They simply could not leave. Far across the galaxy, in a region of space that appeared empty on every scanner and map, the Sol system thrived with life. Earth spun blue and green as it always had. The moon still circled faithfully. Mars gleamed red with the lights of 30 billion inhabitants. Europa's ice held cities beneath its frozen shell. Titan's orange clouds concealed floating platforms where another 20 billion people lived and worked. Orbital stations ringed every planet. Massive cylinders rotated to create gravity for the 50 billion, who called the void their home. Ships moved constantly between worlds carrying cargo, passengers, and dreams. But none of them could leave the system. Admiral Sarah Chen stood on the observation deck of the military station Unity 1. She was 53 years old. With gray streaking through her black hair, she had spent her entire career preparing for something that never came. First contact, the day humanity would meet aliens. Still nothing, her second officer reported. The barrier is still there, Sarah nodded. Everyone called it the barrier, though no one understood what it was. Anything that tried to leave the Sol system simply stopped responding. Ships, probes, even radio signals. They went out and silence came back. Something surrounded their entire star system, cutting them off from the universe beyond. Humanity had discovered this 10,000 years ago when they first developed faster-than-light travel. The joy of that achievement had turned to horror when they realized they were trapped. Generations of scientists had studied the barrier. Generations of engineers had tried to break through. Nothing worked, so humanity had turned inward. They built and grew within their cage. They fought wars among themselves over resources and ideology. They made peace and broke it and made it again. They wondered endlessly if they were alone in the universe or if something had deliberately imprisoned them. Sarah had joined the first contact fleet when she was 20. That was 33 years ago. 33 years of waiting for a door that would not open. "Admiral," a technician called out. "We're getting some strange readings from the barrier." Sarah's heart jumped. Strange readings usually meant nothing, but she walked quickly to the scanner station anyway. "Show me." The holographic display showed the invisible wall that surrounded their system. Except now, tiny fluctuations rippled across its surface like waves on water. "What is that?" Sarah whispered. "Unknown. It started about 10 minutes ago." "The fluctuations are increasing." Sarah watched the display. The waves grew stronger. Her hands gripped the edge of the console. Something was happening. After 10,000 years, something was finally happening. "Alert all stations," she ordered. "Get me the Secretary General. Get me everyone." The waves grew into pulses. The pulses grew into surges. Energy readings spiked across every instrument. Alarms began to sound as sensors overloaded trying to measure what was occurring. And then, like a soap bubble popping, the barrier vanished. Silence fell across Unity 1. For a moment, no one moved. No one breathed. Then the sensors came alive with data. Stars. Thousands of stars that had been invisible suddenly appeared. Radio signals. Electromagnetic radiation. Heat signatures. Energy readings that could only mean one thing: civilizations. "Oh my God," someone whispered. Sarah's hands trembled. "Start recording everything. Begin analysis of all signals. Prepare the first contact protocols." She paused, hardly believing the words coming from her mouth. "We are not alone." Across human space, the news spread like wildfire. Earth was no longer isolated. The barrier was gone. The universe was full of life. Full of people. Full of possibilities. Dr. James Okonkwo was in his office at the University of Lagos when he heard. He was 71 years old and had spent 50 years of his life learning to speak to aliens. He had studied every language on Earth. He had developed frameworks for communicating with minds that might think nothing like humans. He had written 30 books on xenolinguistics, all theoretical because there were no aliens to talk to. He sat down heavily in his chair and started to cry. Happy tears, grateful tears. His life's work was not wasted. There would be someone to talk to after all. But while humanity celebrated, on the other side of the barrier's collapse, the Galactic Council was in chaos. The entire star system just appeared, Council Military Commander Sci-Fi reported. His scaled face showed confusion and concern. No system existed in that location yesterday. Today, sensors show 9 planets and energy signatures indicating massive population centers. How is that possible? Someone demanded. Unknown. We are analyzing the data now. Thelax felt her wings flutter. The coordinates. Check the coordinates against the ancient texts. They did. The location matched perfectly. The system that had appeared was exactly where the old legend said Earth should be. Send the harmonious accord, the council decided. We will make contact carefully. We do not know who or what we will find. 3 months of preparation followed. Both sides moved cautiously. Humanity built the Olive Branch, a ship designed for peace covered in landing platforms and meeting halls. The council prepared the harmonious accord. their most beautiful diplomatic vessel, a work of art that happened to fly. Admiral Sarah Chen was chosen to lead humanity's delegation. Dr. Okonkwo would handle communications. 300 diplomats, scientists, and soldiers would accompany them. On the day of departure, Sarah stood before the gathered crew. "We are about to meet our neighbors," she said. "We will show them the best of what humanity can be. We will offer friendship. We will seek understanding. This is the most important journey our species has ever taken." The two ships launched toward each other, crossing the vast distance at faster-than-light speeds. They agreed to meet halfway in neutral space between their territories. When the olive branch dropped out of FTL, Sarah saw the harmonious accord for the first time. It was beautiful. Graceful curves and elegant design. Nothing like the angular, practical human ship. "They are hailing us," the communications officer reported. Sarah took a deep breath. "Open the channel. Let history begin." On the view screen, a crystalline face appeared. It was Kirith, chosen to lead the council's delegation. The being's features were alien and strange, but something in its eyes seemed gentle, curious, hopeful. "Greetings," Kirith said, in a language Sarah did not understand. But Dr. Okonkwo was already working, and the translation computers were learning. "We welcome you to the galactic community." "We have much to discuss," Sarah smiled. "We agree. We have waited a long time for this moment. Let us begin." Neither side knew that something else had awakened, far away in the darkness between galaxies. Ancient things stirred, things that had been sleeping, things that were hungry. The barrier had not just kept humanity in, it had kept something else out. The meeting room aboard the Harmonious Accord was designed to accommodate many different life forms. The atmosphere was carefully balanced. The temperature was neutral. Seats and perches of various designs lined the walls. It was the council's way of showing respect for diversity. Admiral Sarah Chen floated through the entrance with Dr. Okonkwo and her security chief beside her. The gravity was lighter than Earth standard. She felt awkward and heavy in her uniform, compared to the graceful aliens who seemed to glide effortlessly through the space. Ambassador Kirith approached them. The crystalline being's body caught and reflected the light in rainbow patterns. "Welcome. We are pleased you accepted our invitation." Dr. Okonkwo's translation device worked perfectly now. 3 months of signal exchange had given both sides enough data to build working translators. "The pleasure is ours," Sarah replied. "Humanity has dreamed of this day for 10,000 years. 10,000 years? Kirith's tone suggested surprise. "That is how long you have been isolated?" "Yes, we could not leave our system. Something prevented us." Thelax, the moth-like researcher, came forward. Her wings moved gently in the low gravity. "The ancient texts mention a barrier, something the predecessors built, but we do not know why." "Predecessors?" Sarah asked. "The species that came before us," Kirith explained. "They built many things across the galaxy. Then they vanished millions of years ago. We still do not understand what happened to them." The talks continued for hours. Humanity learned they were joining a community of thousands of species. The Galactic Council had existed for 8,000 years, maintaining peace and cooperation across hundreds of thousands of worlds. Wars were rare. Conflicts were resolved through dialogue. The galaxy, they said, had learned to live together. Sarah found it almost too good to be true. "You have no militaries?" "We have defense forces," Zephyrin replied. The scaled commander had joined the meeting. "But they are small. We have not fought a major war in over 2,000 years. The galaxy is peaceful." Dr. Okonkwo exchanged glances with Sarah. Humanity's history was different, very different. But they said nothing. Not yet. The cultural exchange began in earnest. Council scientists visited human ships. Human diplomats toured council stations. Everyone was fascinated by everyone else. But differences began to emerge. Small ones at first, then larger ones that could not be ignored. A council inspection team arrived at Unity 1 to observe human technology. They walked through the military station with growing unease. Everything had armor plating. Every corridor had weapons lockers. Every civilian habitat they scanned showed defensive systems. "Why are your cities armed?" the lead inspector asked. "You had no external threats." Colonel Marcus Webb, the station commander, seemed confused by the question. "We had internal threats. Different nations competed for resources. Different groups had conflicting ideologies. We fought each other, But your species survived the wars. You learned peace. We learned temporary peace, Marcus corrected. We still have disputes. We simply choose to resolve most of them without violence now. But we stay prepared in case that changes. The inspectors found the human mindset disturbing. Every defensive system was efficient and deadly. Human weapons were not designed to disable or deter. They were designed to destroy completely. The Council's weapons were elegant and measured. Human weapons were brutal and overwhelming. They are too militarized, one inspector reported back to the Council. Every aspect of their society is built around conflict. On Earth, human observers noticed different problems. Council technology was incredible, but it was optimized for efficiency and beauty rather than durability. Their ships were fast but lightly armored. Their defensive systems were sophisticated but had low output. Everything was designed for a peaceful galaxy. They are not prepared for real war, General Liu reported to Earth Security Council. If someone attacked them with serious intent, they would struggle to respond. Maybe no one does attack them, someone suggested. Maybe they are right and the galaxy is peaceful. Maybe, Liu agreed. But he did not sound convinced. Corporal Maria Santos was 24 years old and had never expected to leave Earth's orbital defense forces. Now she found herself assigned as part of a cultural exchange program, living aboard a council station with soldiers from a dozen species. Her roommate was a being called Vixen, who resembled a blue-furred fox with 6 legs. Vixen was part of the Council Defense Forces, though she had never seen combat. None of them had. "Do you really practice for war every day?" Vixen asked, watching Maria clean her rifle. "Yes. Training keeps us ready." "But ready for what?" "There is no war." Maria paused. How could she explain? "My grandmother told me stories about the water wars. 2 billion people died fighting over resources. My grandfather fought in the African conflicts. 30 million dead. We remember these things. We train so they do not happen again, but we train knowing they could." Vixen's ears flattened. "Your species has hurt itself so much. I am sorry. Do not be sorry. We survived. We learned. But we did not forget." The friendship between them grew despite the differences. They learned from each other. Maria taught Vixen human combat techniques. Vixen taught Maria council philosophy. They represented in small what the larger relationship was becoming. Mutual respect built on very different foundations. Dr. Okonkwo spent his days working on translation and cultural frameworks. The language barriers were falling quickly, but conceptual barriers remained. Some ideas simply did not translate well between species that had evolved in such different circumstances that the council species struggled to understand human concepts like mutually assured destruction or total war. These ideas had no equivalence in their recent history. Humans struggled to understand council concepts like voluntary resource sharing and conflict resolution through artistic competition. These worked in council space but seemed impossibly naive to human minds. "We are too different," Thelax said one evening, dining with Dr. Okonkwo aboard the Olive Branch. "Perhaps the barrier existed to keep our civilizations separate. Or perhaps it existed to let us develop separately," Okonkwo replied. "So we could offer different perspectives, different strengths." "What strength does violence bring?" Okonkwo considered carefully. "Violence itself brings nothing good. But the knowledge of violence, the preparation for it, the ability to meet it when necessary, these things can protect what is precious. Your people have built something beautiful, peace across thousands of worlds. But what happens if something threatens that peace?" "We negotiate. We find common ground. And if your enemy has no interest in common ground, if they only want destruction?" Thelax's antennae twitched uncomfortably. "Such beings do not exist anymore. Not in our galaxy." But even as she said it, something was moving through the darkness. Something that cared nothing for negotiation or common ground. The first warnings came from deep space monitoring stations. Strange readings from empty regions of space. Energy signatures that appeared and disappeared. Movement where nothing should be moving. The Council's scientists analyzed the data for weeks before calling an emergency session. Kirith stood before the assembled leaders and delivered news that would change everything. "We have detected an unknown fleet approaching the outer colonies. They are not responding to hails. Their trajectory suggests they are headed toward Bright Sky Colony. Perhaps they are explorers," someone suggested. Like the humans were isolated, maybe these beings were as well. Send diplomatic ships, the council decided. Make contact peacefully. But Thelax remembered something from the old texts, something she had not mentioned before. She pulled up the ancient files and searched frantically through the predecessor warnings. There, buried in damaged data, she found it. References to the harvest, a species that consumed others. Something the predecessors had fought. Something they had sealed away in dark space. And references to Terra's children, warriors born, sealed not as punishment, but as protection. Her wings began to tremble. "We need to call the humans," she said. "Right now." But the message would take time to reach Earth, and Bright Sky Colony did not have time. The diplomatic ships reached the unknown fleet. They broadcast greetings in 1,000 languages. They showed peaceful intent. They opened their communications wide. The unknown fleet fired without hesitation. The diplomatic ships died in seconds. No survivors, no warning, no mercy. Then the fleet, which Council sensors now showed was more like a swarm, fell upon Bright Sky Colony like locusts. 4 billion people screamed for help. The Council mobilized their defense forces as fast as they could, but they were scattered across the galaxy, designed for patrols and shows of presence, not rapid response to crisis. Bright Sky fell in 72 hours. When Council ships finally arrived, they found nothing alive. The cities were empty. The orbital stations were dark. 4 billion people simply gone, consumed. The galaxy realized something terrible. After thousands of years of peace, war had returned, and they had forgotten how to fight it. The emergency broadcast reached every corner of Council space. 4 billion dead, an entire colony consumed. The peaceful galaxy had witnessed its first mass casualty event in 2,000 years. Aboard the Olive Branch, Admiral Sarah Chen watched the reports with growing horror. The footage showed devastated cities, empty streets, ships torn apart. Whatever attacked Bright Sky had not just killed. It had erased every trace of life. What could do this? Dr. Okonkwo asked, his voice shaking. "Something that sees us as food," Sarah replied grimly. The Council named it the Vexarun Swarm, after ancient words meaning the end that consumes. But names did not matter. What mattered was stopping it. Council ships mobilized from hundreds of systems. They gathered into the largest fleet assembled in millennia. Over 3,000 vessels, each beautiful and advanced. The crews were brave but inexperienced. None had fought a real war. None had faced an enemy that wanted only destruction. Fleet Master Zephyr commanded the armada from his flagship, the Morning Light. It was a vessel designed for exploration and diplomacy, hastily fitted with upgraded weapons. Most Council ships were the same. They had tools for defense, but their entire philosophy was built around avoiding conflict. "We will meet them at the Kepler Prime Station," Zephyr announced. "We will show them that the Council protects its own." Earth watched the preparations with increasing concern. Sarah sent message after message offering assistance. Human military advisors were ready. Human ships could be dispatched. Humanity's long, painful experience with war could be shared. Every offer was politely declined. "We appreciate your concern," Kirith told Sarah during a diplomatic call, "but this is a Council matter. Your species has only just joined the galactic community. You lack experience with our coordination protocols. It would take too long to integrate your forces." What Kirith did not say, but Sarah heard anyway, was that the Council did not want humanity's kind of war. They would handle this with their methods. Measured, civilized, controlled. Sarah closed the communication channel and turned to her command staff. "They are going to get slaughtered. They outnumbered the enemy, 3-1 according to their scouts." Her tactical officer pointed out. "Numbers do not matter if you do not know how to use them." On Earth, the debate raged. Should humanity intervene without permission? Should they respect Council wishes and stay back? The Security Council was divided. "We owe them nothing yet," one member argued. "Let them handle their own problems." "We owe them decency," another countered. 4 billion dead. How can we stand by? General Liu made the strongest case. This swarm attacked without warning and without mercy. If it defeats the Council, it will come for us eventually. We should fight it now while we have allies. But the decision was made to wait. Humanity would respect Council wishes. For now. The swarm reached Kepler Prime Station 3 weeks after Bright Sky fell. Council scouts had tracked its movement. It was heading directly for the station, where 15 billion beings lived and worked. The Council fleet positioned itself between the station and the approaching threat. Fleet Master Sci-Fi broadcast to his fleet, "We stand for peace. We stand for life. We will show this enemy that the Council does not abandon its people." The swarm arrived in a cloud of biomechanical nightmares, ships that looked grown rather than built, hulls of metal and flesh fused together. Sensors showed thousands of individual vessels all moving in perfect coordination. Zephyr opened all frequencies. "Unknown vessels, this is Fleet Master Zephyr of the Galactic Council. You have committed acts of violence against peaceful beings. We ask that you cease hostilities and enter negotiations." The swarm responded with weapons fire. The battle began badly for the Council. Their ships were fast and their shields were strong, but their weapons were designed for precision, not power. They fired beams meant to disable enemy systems. They launched projectiles designed to force surrender. The swarm had no systems to disable, no crew to convince, no concept of surrender. Swarm vessels tore through Council shields with biological weapons that adapted to energy frequencies. They closed a boarding range and released creatures that ate through hull plating. They replicated in real time, building new ships from the wreckage of destroyed Council vessels. Zephyr watched his fleet shrink. Beautiful ships crewed by brave people died one after another. His careful tactics meant nothing against an enemy that felt no fear and accepted no terms. "Fall back to defensive formation around the station," he ordered. "Protect the civilians." But the swarm split its forces. Half continued the assault on the fleet. Half bypassed the battle entirely and went straight for Kepler Prime. On the station, panic erupted. 15 billion beings tried to evacuate. The Council's evacuation protocols were thorough but slow. They prioritized the young and injured. They organized orderly queues. They followed procedure even as death approached. Thelax was on Kepler Prime helping coordinate the evacuation of her research facility. Her students and colleagues moved calmly despite their terror. This was the Council way. Order even in chaos, but there were too many people and too little time. The swarm reached the station's outer ring. It began to tear through the hull. Atmospheric shields failed. Sections decompressed. Thousands died in seconds. The creatures poured inside, hunting anything that moved. Zephyr threw everything he had at the swarm forces attacking the station. His ships made suicide runs, buying seconds for more evacuations. The morning light itself drove into the heart of the swarm formation, weapons firing continuously. "Get the people out," Zephyr ordered. "That is all that matters now." The Council fleet fought with desperate courage. But courage without experience, without the brutal knowledge of how to kill efficiently, was not enough. After 6 hours, Zephyr gave the hardest order of his life. "All ships, full retreat. Save who you can and withdraw." The evacuation ships jumped to faster-than-light speed, carrying 4 billion survivors. 11 billion were left behind. The Council fleet limped away with 40% casualties. Over 1,000 beautiful ships destroyed. Kepler Prime fell. The swarm consumed it completely. Across Council space, the news hit like a physical blow. 11 billion dead. The fleet shattered. The enemy was unstoppable. For the first time in thousands of years, the Galactic Council knew fear. Emergency sessions were called. Every species sent representatives. The debate was frantic and desperate. "We need to evacuate the border. Colonies," someone suggested. "We need to call for a general." "Retreat," another said. "We need to find a way to negotiate," a third insisted. Thelax stood and spoke quietly. Her voice cut through the panic. "We need to ask the humans for help." Silence fell. "They are too few," someone protested. "They have only a few hundred ships. But they know war," Thelax replied. "They have fought wars that killed billions. They built their entire civilization around surviving conflict. We built ours around avoiding it. We were wrong." Kirith spoke up, the crystalline being's voice heavy with grief. "The humans offered assistance. We refused. How can we ask them now?" "Because people are dying," Thelax said simply. "Pride is a luxury we no longer have." The debate continued for hours, but the conclusion was inevitable. The Council had run out of options. Back on the Olive Branch, Admiral Sarah Chen received the message she had been dreading and expecting. It was Fleet Master Zephyr himself, his scaled face showing exhaustion and something humans knew well, the look of a commander who had lost too many people. "Admiral Chen," he said quietly, The Galactic Council requests the assistance of humanity. We need your help, please. Sarah felt no satisfaction in being right. Only sadness for what those words cost him. Fleetmaster Humanity will answer. Tell us where you need us. There is a colony called New Haven, 22 billion people. The swarm will reach it in 36 hours. Our fleet cannot arrive in time. Sarah checked her star charts. New Haven was far from human space, but her ships could make it, barely. We will be there. Thank you. Zephyrin paused. I do not know what your ships can do that ours cannot, but I pray it is enough. Sarah closed the channel and turned to her crew. All hands, battle stations. Send the recall signal to Earth. Tell them to mobilize the First Fleet. Tell them we are going to war. Across human space, warships that had been waiting for 10,000 years received their orders. Crews that had trained endlessly for a fight that never came suddenly had a purpose. Weapons that had been maintained in careful readiness powered up. The galaxy was about to learn what humanity had become during their long isolation. They were about to learn what 10,000 years of preparing for the worst could create. The hammer was about to fall. New Haven was a paradise world. Rolling green hills covered 3 continents. Blue oceans sparkled under a yellow sun. The colony had existed for 600 years and was home to 22 billion beings from 40 different species. It was a symbol of what the Council had built, different people living together in peace. Now that peace was about to end. The evacuation had begun the moment the swarm's trajectory was confirmed. But moving 22 billion people was impossible in 36 hours. Maybe a billion could escape. The rest would die unless someone stopped the swarm. The Council fleet was too far away. Every ship that could move was racing toward New Haven, but they would arrive hours too late. The planet's defense forces were brave but small. They had weapons designed for pirates and smugglers, not for a swarm that had destroyed an entire station. On New Haven, a mother held her 3 children close. They were not human, but the love in her eyes was universal. It will be okay, she lied. The Council will save us. In orbit, the defense commander looked at his 16 ships and knew they would not be enough. But they would fight anyway. They would buy time for the evacuation ships. Minutes, maybe hours if they were lucky. The swarm approached like a dark cloud blotting out the stars. Then something impossible happened. Space tore open. Faster than light ruptures appeared one after another. Ships emerged, but they were not Council vessels. These ships were angular and brutal. No elegant curves. No artistic design. They looked like weapons that happened to fly. 200 human warships dropped into New Haven space. Admiral Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of her flagship, the Indomitable. Around her, the first contact fleet had transformed. Gone were the diplomatic configurations and greeting platforms. The ships had reconfigured to war mode. Weapons ports opened. Armor plates locked. Every system was optimized for one purpose: destruction. All ships, this is Admiral Chen. New Haven will not fall today. Make ready. The Council Defense Commander stared at his screens in shock. Human vessels, this is Defense Commander Lorian. We were not expecting you. Commander, withdraw your ships to the planet. Protect the evacuation sites. We will handle the swarm. But there are thousands of them and only 200 of you. Sarah's smile was not kind. It was the smile of a predator. Then the odds are almost even. Indomitable out, the human fleet moved into formation. Not the careful, organized formations the Council used. Human ships spread out in loose clusters, each one capable of independent action but coordinating through AI systems the Council had banned millennia ago. The swarm did not slow down. It had learned nothing meant negotiation. Nothing meant mercy. It only knew consumption. The two forces met in the space between New Haven and its moon. The swarm attacked with the same tactics that had destroyed the Council fleet. Biomechanical ships closed rapidly. Adaptive weapons fired. Boarding creatures launched. The human response was immediate and overwhelming. Humanity had spent 10,000 years developing weapons for every nightmare they could imagine. Kinetic cannons fired projectiles at 3% light speed. The rounds punched through swarm vessels like paper. Nuclear-pumped plasma lances created temperatures matching the sun's core. Gravity field generators crushed enemy ships into spheres of compressed matter. The swarm adapted its shields to energy weapons. Humans switched to kinetic. The swarm hardened its armor. Humans fired armor-piercing explosives. The swarm sent boarding parties. Humans decompressed entire sections of their ships, venting the creatures into space, then repressurized and continued fighting. Every human adaptation was faster than the swarm's evolution. Every human tactic was brutal in its efficiency. Corporal Maria Santos was aboard the destroyer Relentless when it took a boarding hit. Swarm creatures tore through the outer hull. The ship's AI immediately locked down the affected sections and vented atmosphere. "Seal up," Maria ordered her fire team. "We are going in." Her squad entered the compromised section in full combat armor. The creatures they found were nightmares made real. Part insect, part machine, all hunger. They moved with frightening speed. Maria's squad moved faster. Rail rifles cracked. Explosive rounds detonated. Plasma cutters burned. The fight was close and vicious. One creature got past Maria's defense and tore through her armor plating. She felt claws rake across her ribs even as she jammed her sidearm under its carapace and fired until it stopped moving. "Section clear," she reported, breathing hard. "Hull breach sealed. Requesting damage control." "Negative," the ship's captain replied. "We need you on shuttle. Ground assault. New Haven surface." Maria looked at her bleeding side. "Understood." Santos out. The swarm had landed troops on New Haven's surface. They were attacking evacuation sites. The human response was to send their own ground forces down. This was something the Council never did. They would not risk civilian casualties with orbital strikes near populated areas. They would evacuate first, then fight. Humans calculated acceptable risk differently. Maria's shuttle dropped through the atmosphere with 11 others. They landed near an evacuation center, where 3 million civilians were boarding transport ships. Swarm creatures were already attacking the perimeter. "Light them up," the strike commander ordered. Orbital platforms began firing, not the precise targeted strikes the Council used. Human orbital strikes were area denial weapons. They turned square kilometers into craters. But the calculations were perfect. Every strike landed exactly where it needed to be. Close enough to annihilate the swarm forces, far enough to keep the civilians safe. The margin for error was meters. Humans accepted that margin. Maria's squad hit the ground and moved toward the evacuation center. Swarm creatures were everywhere. The battle became a chaotic swirl of violence. Council defenders fought bravely but carefully, trying not to hit civilians. Human soldiers fought with controlled aggression, trusting their training and enhanced targeting systems. A young Council defender, Vixen, was pinned down by 3 creatures. She had exhausted her weapons charge trying to disable them. They were about to overwhelm her when Maria appeared, rifle firing. "Stay down!" Maria shouted. She killed 2 creatures with precise headshots, then used her last grenade on the third. "You okay?" Vixen stared at her friend. "You are injured. I will live, come on. We need to hold this position." Together they fought. Human aggression paired with Council precision. They held the line while behind them. 3 million civilians boarded the evacuation ships. In orbit, the battle continued. Human ships took heavy casualties. The swarm was learning, adapting, evolving its tactics. But humans adapted faster. They had centuries of experience fighting enemies who learned and changed. They had developed doctrine for adaptive threats. The Indomitable lost its main cannon. Sarah ordered a ramming course. "All power to forward shields. We are going through them." Her ship plowed through the swarm formation like a battering ram, firing every weapon it had at point-blank range. The shields failed. The armor buckled. But the Indomitable emerged on the other side, trailing atmosphere and debris but still fighting. Hull breaches on decks 4 through 9. The damage control officer reported. "Casualties are heavy. Seal what you can. Keep us in the fight," Sarah ordered. Around her, her bridge crew worked with calm efficiency. They had trained for this. They were ready for this. The battle lasted 6 hours. Human ships fought with a ferocity that shocked the Council observers. When weapons ran dry, they used their ships as weapons. When systems failed, they improvised. When death came, they met it while still fighting. 30% of the human fleet was destroyed. 40 ships gone. 12,000 dead, but the swarm was broken. For the first time since appearing in Council space, it was forced to retreat. The creatures fled into dark space, leaving behind the wreckage of thousands of their vessels. New Haven was saved. On the surface, Maria sat against a wall while a medic worked on her wounds. The cut was deep but not fatal. She would have a scar to match the ones her grandmother earned in the water wars. Vixen sat beside her, fur matted with dust and blood. I do not understand, the council soldier said quietly. How can you fight like that? So violent, so willing to die. Maria was quiet for a moment. Because the alternative is watching others die. Because we know what happens when good people do nothing. Because we are human and we remember every lesson we learned the hard way. It is terrifying, Vixen said. Yes, it is. Maria looked at her friend. But it kept you alive. It kept them alive. She gestured to the millions of civilians now safely aboard evacuation ships. That is what matters. In orbit, Admiral Sarah Chen surveyed the damage to her fleet. 40 ships lost, 12,000 dead. The cost was terrible. But she had been in the military long enough to know that sometimes the cost of not fighting was worse. A communication came through. It was Fleetmaster Zephyr. His fleet had arrived just in time to see the battle's end. Admiral Chen, he said quietly, I witnessed what occurred here. I do not have words. You do not need words, Fleetmaster. You asked for help. We gave it. You saved 22 billion lives. You lost 12,000 of your own doing it. Sarah closed her eyes briefly. 12,000 names. 12,000 families who would grieve. Yeah, why? Zephyr asked. Why pay such a price for people you barely know? Sarah opened her eyes. Because someone had to. Because we could. The war room on Earth was quiet despite the dozens of people present. Holograms showed star charts with red markers indicating swarm sightings. Intelligence reports scrolled across screens. Representatives from both human and council military stood together planning. General Liu pointed to a dead world deep in unexplored space. We have tracked the swarm's movements. They always return to this location. We believe this is their origin point, the place they were sealed away. Thelak studied the data carefully. Her research into predecessor sites had revealed more information. The old texts call it the cradle. The predecessors fought the swarm millions of years ago. They could not destroy it, so they imprisoned it. The barrier around your system was part of the same network of seals. And when the barrier fell, the swarm was released, Dr. Okonkwo concluded. Yes. The predecessors failed to eliminate the threat. They only delayed it. Fleetmaster Zephyr looked at the tactical display. If we destroy the cradle, we eliminate the swarm's ability to replicate and coordinate. Cut off the head. Easier said than done, General Liu replied. The cradle will be heavily defended. The swarm has been rebuilding since New Haven. Our intelligence suggests they have tens of thousands of vessels now. Admiral Sarah Chen studied the numbers. Even combined human and council forces were outnumbered. But she had learned something about the council in recent months. They were brilliant strategists when they allowed themselves to think beyond their peaceful conditioning. They had technology humanity could only dream of. Together they were more than the sum of their parts. We can do this, Sarah said, but we need everything. Every ship, every soldier, one final battle. The plan took shape over weeks. The council would provide the numbers and technology. Humanity would provide tactical doctrine and weapons designed for overwhelming force. Together they would assault the cradle. 2,000 council ships prepared for war. They were retrofitted with human weapon systems. Council engineers and human technicians worked side by side, combining technologies in ways neither had considered before. 600 human warships joined the armada. It was the largest fleet humanity had ever assembled. Every ship was crewed and ready. Every weapon was loaded. The first contact fleet had become an invasion force. Training exercises brought the two militaries together. Council crews learned human tactics. Human crews learned council coordination protocols. It was not always smooth. Cultural differences created friction. Different philosophies clashed. But slowly, understanding grew. Corporal Maria Santos found herself training council soldiers in ground combat. She stood before a class of 50 beings from a dozen species and tried to explain concepts that made many of them uncomfortable. Violence is not the goal, she said. Survival is the goal. Victory is the goal. But to achieve those goals, you must be willing to do things that feel wrong. You must be willing to hurt others to protect what matters. A young council soldier raised a tentacle. How do you live with that? How do you do terrible things and remain good? Maria thought of her grandmother. Thought of the stories of war and peace. You remember why you fight. You remember who you are protecting. And you never forget that the enemy forced this choice on you. You did not want this. But when it comes, you do not hesitate. Vixen, who had become Maria's constant companion, spoke up. She is right. At New Haven I hesitated. I tried to find a peaceful solution even as the creatures were killing civilians. Maria did not hesitate. She did what was necessary. That is why we lived. The class was quiet, absorbing this difficult lesson. On Earth, Dr. Okonkwo worked on something equally important. He was writing the historical record of these events. Someone needed to document what was happening. The galaxy needed to remember. He wrote about the Council's long peace and how it had made them vulnerable. He wrote about humanity's violent past and how it had prepared them for this moment. He wrote about the cost of war and the necessity of it when evil left no choice. Future generations need to understand, he told Thelax, who was helping him research. They need to know that peace is precious, but that sometimes it must be defended with force. The Council forgot this, Thelax said sadly. We believed violence itself was the enemy. We learned too late that violence is a tool. It can be used for evil or for protection. The wielder determines its morality, not the tool itself. The day came. The Armada assembled at a staging point 3 light-years from the cradle. 2,600 ships from 100 different worlds, millions of soldiers, all preparing to face the nightmare that had plagued the galaxy. Admiral Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of the Indomitable, now repaired and upgraded with Council shields. Beside her, Fleetmaster Zephyr commanded from his new flagship, the Second Dawn, fitted with human weapons. All ships report ready, the communications officer announced. Sarah looked at Zephyr. In the months since New Haven, they had become more than allies. They had become friends. Ready to end this? Ready, he confirmed. The Armada jumped to faster than light speed. When they emerged at the cradle, they found what they expected. The dead world was surrounded by swarm vessels. Thousands of them. Maybe tens of thousands. The sensors could barely count them all. All ships, this is Admiral Chen. We knew this would not be easy, but we fight for every world the swarm has destroyed. For Bright Sky, for Kepler Prime, for all the billions who died. Today we end the harvest. All ships engage. The battle began. The swarm met them with everything it had. Wave after wave of biomechanical horrors launched from the cradle's surface. The space around the planet became a storm of weapons fire and explosions. The combined fleet fought with coordinated precision. Council ships used their advanced sensors to identify priority targets. Human ships eliminated those targets with brutal efficiency. When swarm vessels tried to adapt, the fleet adapted faster, but the cost was terrible. Ships died by the dozens, then by the hundreds. The swarm was defending its home with desperate fury. Maria Santos was aboard the assault carrier with 10,000 other soldiers. Their mission was to reach the cradle surface and destroy the replication centers that allowed the swarm to build new ships. 2 minutes to insertion, the pilot announced. Maria checked her squad. Humans and Council soldiers mixed together. They had trained for this. They were ready. Remember your training. Watch each other's backs. We go in together, we come out together. Vixen gripped her weapon tightly. Together. The carrier punched through the swarm's orbital defenses. Hundreds of other carriers did the same. They crashed into the cradle's surface and deployed their troops. The ground war was worse than anything Maria had experienced. The swarm's home world was a nightmare landscape of organic technology and writhing creatures. The replication centers were massive structures that pulsed with stolen life. Maria's squad fought their way toward one such center. The combat was close and brutal. Soldiers fell. But for everyone who fell, 2 more pushed forward. They reached the replication center. Human engineers began setting charges while Council soldiers held the perimeter. The explosives were special, designed by Earth scientists to create a chain reaction that would destroy the center completely. Charges set, the engineer reported. We have 5 minutes. Fall back. Maria ordered, but the swarm was not done. A massive creature larger than anything they had seen burst from the ground. It moved toward the charges, trying to stop the detonation. Maria made a decision. Get everyone out. I will hold it. Maria, no. Vixen shouted. Someone has to. Go, that is an order. Her squad retreated. Maria stood alone between the creature and the charges. She fired every weapon she had. When her rifle was empty, she used her sidearm. When that ran dry, she used grenades. When those were gone, she used her combat knife. The creature reached her. She could not stop it. But she had delayed it long enough, the charges detonated. The replication center exploded. The creature died. Maria died with it. Across the battlefield, other squads made similar sacrifices. Hundreds of soldiers gave everything to destroy the replication centers, but they succeeded. One by one, the centers fell. In orbit, the fleet continued its assault. Admiral Sarah Chen watched the casualty reports climb. Over 1,000 ships lost. Hundreds of thousands dead, but the swarm was weakening. Its ability to build new vessels was failing. All ships, final push, she ordered. Hit them with everything. The fleet surged forward. Human ships fired every weapon until their magazines were empty, then rammed swarm vessels. Council ships used their superior engines to create impossible maneuvers, striking from unexpected angles. The swarm broke, its coordination failed as the replication centers died. Individual vessels began fleeing. The fleet hunted them down one by one. The cradle is clear, a scout reported. No remaining swarm presence detected. Sarah allowed herself one moment of relief. Then she thought of Maria Santos and the hundreds like her who would never go home. Honor the fallen. Record every name. They saved us all. The war ended. The swarm was not completely eliminated. Scattered remnants would need to be hunted for years. But its ability to threaten the galaxy was broken. The fleet returned to council space as heroes, but the celebrations were muted. Too many had died. Too much had been lost. 5 years passed, the galaxy changed. Earth integrated into the council, but on unique terms.